And welcome back to Think Tank with Frank Kenney. I'm Frank Kenney. This is my email. If you have any questions or comments, or tell us what you think about what we're saying. I'm joined today by my colleague, Bruce Hamblin. And Bruce is an architect, a guru, genius. Bruce is the guy that I go to whenever I have any questions or I don't understand something. And what Bruce is, what Bruce and I were having a conversation, and we were talking about these multiple waves of supply chain disruption that's happening with this pandemic that we're facing, and somewhat in the future, what's going to happen. So first and foremost, Bruce, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
And so Bruce, let's jump right onto it. So we've been living this thing real time. My family goes to the grocery store. We can't find soap. We can't find toilet paper. Hospitals can't find masks, and the conversation about ventilators is happening. And it seems like the whole entire crush of demand is happening, and is all happening at once. What many people don't understand is, maybe not the toilet paper, but aren't you, with everything that had been happening in China and in South Korea, and certainly even in Italy, why weren't why weren't we more prepared for this crush of demand that has happened, and we're still in the midst of? So that question for you, and then how do we address when the next phase of the pandemic comes back around and causes disruption? I'm sure we're going to have another crush of demand, but how can we be better prepared for it? So why weren't we prepared, and how can we be better prepared for it?
Well, traditionally, the supply chains are based around normal ebbs and flows. If you think of it in terms of like your waves with the ocean, you have tides, you have waves that come in, waves right on top of the tides, and it's a regular cycle. They can be planned. You can anticipate what would be happening. If you look at something like COVID-19, that is to the wave model what a tsunami is to the shore. So we had a major tsunami hit, comes across. It drove two different things. First, it drove a huge spike in demand. All of a sudden, supply chain works on balancing demand and supply. Demand pushes information up, things are manufactured, and they flow back down. And there's some anticipation about how these things cycle, but pretty much that's what happens. Now, all of a sudden, you have a very high, unexpected spike. People are buying everything they can find, every toilet paper roll, every hand sanitizer. They're buying them as fast as they can find them. Their demand is outstripping the anticipated supply. Doesn't mean that the supply won't catch up to it. It just means that for a period of time, that demand is higher than the anticipated supply can replenish it. That's why we see these short-term outages of products.
So I want to make sure that I get that, because I think you're saying something, or I know you're saying something that's incredibly substantial. On the bottom, I have my customers, and on top of that, I may have my retailers, and on top of that, I have my distribution networks. I have logistics, transport, and then on top of that, I have manufacturing. But on top of that, I have suppliers. And so, as a customer, I buy toilet paper, and I buy it from my big box shop or my supermarket, and it gets there via truck, and there's a lot of logistics, and when you pick things up, and who carries it, and how do you show all of that? And that, of course, those trucks pick up on some dock somewhere in the manufacturers. But at the tippy top of the supply chain, I've got suppliers, the guys that may be cutting down the trees and making the big rolls of paper that get cut into the toilet paper. And I think what you're saying is that demand flows upwards, and the name of the game is to meet the supply. And if you balance that, then you've got a healthy supply chain, because you don't have excess inventory, and you don't have a lot of that stuff. But what you're saying is that that tsunami, as you talked about, that tsunami comes up, and all of a sudden that drives that. So,
Right.
are you saying at some point we're going to see that heavy supply to meet that demand come back down? Is that what's going to happen?
Pretty much. There's stuff that's in the supply chain coming back down that was already moving through the suppliers, through the manufacturers, distributors, retail, to the end customer. The demand at the customer with that spike, that tsunami, short term outran the ability of your Blue Arrow to fulfill their demand. We outstripped it. We had more demand than we had supply coming down through the supply chain. Now,
And,
go
and
ahead.
that makes sense. That's the wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning and your supermarket has the stocks, has the shelves refilled. Now
Exactly.
they get emptied out, but that was the stock that was in the that was the stock that was in the pipe. But
Exactly.
but Bruce, does that mean following this model that there's a risk of all of a sudden we're going to have too much toilet paper, and now you'll see the 2 for 1s, or you have chargebacks? What are companies, what are suppliers and manufacturers doing to mitigate that risk of too much?
That's where the magic of the supply chain manager, the little guru that wears the pointy hat and manages the supply chain. They do not want to all of a sudden match that blue arrow coming down to the green arrow going up. It has to be evened out. They will have to anticipate what the waves are going to look like. Now that blue arrow will get thicker, but it can't all of a sudden get as thick as the green arrow immediately or for long term, because then you're going to have a surplus of goods that the customers won't buy. Now, the danger we really run right now is is the disruption. There is a permanent supply chain balance, and there's also an optimum supply chain. What we're discussing here is what's called an optimum supply chain balance. How do you make the supply chain operate as efficiently and as effectively as possible? Ideally, it's a self-regulating engine. Now, the danger we're having right now, though, with things isn't so much in the optimum as much as in the permanent supply chain. There has been a disruption where, if you look at the suppliers, where raw materials actually come from. The danger we're going to have is that the next potential impact is that suppliers are not going to be available to be able to supply goods to the manufacturers, to the distributors, to feed the retailers down. There may be a disruption of the availability of things as the supply chain empties out.
So Bruce, I'm going to pause you there because we're going to be talking about that when we talk about the third wave, and
Yeah.
we absolutely agree. Just a quick question from a demand side.
Mhm.
Um, I know we talk a lot about how retail sees what customers are asking for, and then the distribution and the manufacturers see that, and
Mhm.
then the suppliers see that. Is there any value, or what's the value of kind of opening up so everybody can see everything? What are the positives? What are the pros and cons of doing something like that?
Well, to make the supply chain operate effectively, visibility is key, especially with the new normal. Agility, which is akin to the visibility, is going to be the key to be able to make things work. As the supply chain has been disrupted, the demand is causing things to filter out fast. That's what's causing shortages. But the supply chain itself is open to disruption because of interruptions in materials being able to flow back down. What's going to happen is people are going to need to be able to see this, react quickly to it, and be agile enough to come up with alternate paths for the flow of materials. A manufacturer that's dealt with one or two suppliers may find that he's going to have to rapidly be able to notice that there's disruptions. Those suppliers are not able to keep up with his demand. So therefore, he's going to have to add additional suppliers to be able to meet his demand. The distributors or the wholesalers are going to have a very challenging task of retailers asking them for things, relying upon them to find sources. They're going to be looking at additional manufacturers to be able to even out their supply chain. So what we're going to see is that where a retailer may dealt with one or two wholesalers, they're now going to have multiple wholesalers. Wholesalers are now going to have to look at having multiple manufacturers
Wow.
providing products to them. Manufacturers are going to need to be able to visualize and see and onboard new suppliers quickly. They're going to need to be able to see the effects in almost a real-time mode of how is the supply chain reacting, where are their gaps, where are their peaks, and how do I even them out?
So the supply chain becomes less of this static thing. It becomes
Very
more
much
of
so.
this real time thing. And let me just because I want to capture a couple of things that you said here in the brief time that we got left. You talked about the importance of visibility, and you talked about the importance of control, and you also talked about the importance of efficiency, and you talked about the importance of flexibility.
Mhm.
Anything missing? Anything that we missed there?
Well, if you think about those four business drivers, the next question is how do you handle those? How do you actually do those? That's where the reliance upon comprehensive integration, technology, and the tools. The tools won't solve the problem, but the people need the tools to be able to do it. You have to be able to share information, visualize information, move information very quickly. And that involves full integration of your supply chain with full visibility.
So I know we're too late to catch um, to stop that crush of demand from happening. But again, as we talk about this next phase of the pandemic and the next waves two, three, and four that come down, I know we'll be coming back to this. But this has been incredibly helpful. I think it's consistent whether you're talking about toilet paper or you're talking about healthcare or you're talking about swabs, you're talking about ventilators and keeping people alive. Bruce, want to have you back to do part two, three, and four of this. So we'll see side once again. This is Think Tank with Frank Kenney and my man Bruce. Bruce, I promise next time I'm going to write your name a little better. Bruce, thank you, and we'll see you on the flip side.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.